Welcome to week one of leadership training video segments. We're going to have several weeks ahead, and I call it week one. I don't know how many weeks we'll do, but I'm hoping we do quite a few. And I'm doing this to address what I think is a shared heart that we have to grow our ministry teams, to address problems in our ministry teams, to see God's kingdom grow. I know that you share a heart similar to mine for God's kingdom growth and the longing and desire for more leaders. Matthew 9 says, "Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." And Jesus said the harvest is plentiful. The issue is that there's not enough harvesters. And so he said, pray and ask. And I know that you are, and I am praying and asking that God would raise up more leaders, more harvesters. But it can be a frustrating process. It can be frustrating because while we're praying, there are holes, there are problems, there are people that we deeply care about that sometimes fall through the cracks. And how do we deal with that? So I'm going to try to address in these next few series. I'm going to try to address how we grow as leaders and the things that we can address while we are praying that God would raise up harvesters. In the book of Genesis, I'm just going to read one verse. It's from Genesis chapter 14. Genesis 14:14 says, "When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went and pursued as far as Dan." Now you can look that up on your own a little bit later, but that verse tells me something very important. It tells me that one of the key elements to Abram, who would later become Abraham, one of the key elements to his leadership is his ability to train leaders. That verse says that there is 318 trained men born in his own household. That means that these are people that Abram's known since they were young, and people that he'd invested in, and people that he could say have gone through his training process are now trained. 318. So that means he had a strategy and a plan for training leaders. And so that convicts me that even while I'm praying for God to raise up leaders, it's my responsibility to help train leaders. And you as a leader, it's one of your responsibilities to train leaders as well. There should be a process in place, a strategy that you are working to raise up leaders within your ministry that you're leading. Matthew chapter 25, Jesus says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'm going to put you in charge of many. Come and share your master's happiness." This is part of a parable, a broader parable, but this is really important. And this is one of the things that I've grown very convinced of in my own journey. And that is this, that if I expect my ministry to grow and God's kingdom to grow and the reach of this church and this ministry to grow, then all things point back to the growth of a leader. Am I being faithful in the few things that I've been given right now? Am I personally growing and being faithful? So this is step one in leadership development. It's first leader care. We're actually going to talk about this over the course of the next few weeks. There are three things that you and I have been stewarded by God to care for and grow and maintain. I call them my heart, my hands, and my head. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to take these apart a little bit more, and we're going to talk about how to steward my heart, my hands, and my head, and how these connect to a leader. So in brief, the heart stands for the leader's relationship with God and relationship with his or her closest people. Second, my hands represent the leader's responsibility to use those hands to care for the people that God has given me responsibility to care for. It's shepherding people. And the third is the head, and it's a leader's responsibility to grow in skills so that he or she can execute the ministry that God has given them to do, and also to grow as a leader. So I have a job when I'm praying for leaders and I'm trying to train leaders. My first stop in this training process is to be a great steward of my own heart, my own head, and my own hands. Now I'm going to ask you, during this first video, I want to ask you to do some processing, to think on some things. I want you to consider 3 questions this week. Number 1, I'd like you to identify 3 specific problem areas in your own ministry right now. I'd like you to take a couple of moments and identify 3. Some of you may feel like there's 23. I just want you to hone in on 3 specific problem areas in your own ministry. Second, I'd like you to think a little bit about how those problem areas directly connect with how you are providing leadership for your own head, your own heart, and your own hands. In other words, do these 3 problem areas reveal that you need to invest a little bit more in your intimacy with God, your execution as a leader in this ministry area, or in your shepherding and caring for the people that God has given you? So I'd like you to process. That's the second question. So the first question is, identify 3 specific problem areas in your own ministry right now. Number 2 is, I want you then to think, do these have some sort of connection? Do these problem areas have some sort of thread that connects with some areas that I need to grow in as a leader regarding my relationship with God or my immediate family, or need to grow as an execution in my own ability to execute and my expertise in this area, or in my ability to shepherd and care for people? And the third question that I want you to wrestle with this week is, you have holes in your ministry. Welcome to the club. We all have holes. We have things that are not being done, or positions that are not being filled. And so instead of hyper-focusing on the holes, I want you to wrestle a little bit with your own training process. Do you have a training process in place? Genesis told us that Abram had 318 trained men. He had a process in place. Perhaps there are people already in your circle that have not been envisioned and have not been trained. And perhaps it's time for you to consider somewhat of a process to develop leaders in your own circle. Those are 3 questions I'd like you to wrestle with. I want you to take a few minutes, and after you wrestle with it, I want you to actually post some of your thoughts below this video in the comments section, and so we can have a bit of an online discussion. I'm so grateful for you guys, and I look forward to the next few weeks ahead and to share with you a little bit more about investing as a leader in your heart, in your head, and your hands, and how I'm convinced that this is the first stop in God using you to raise up more leaders, God answering your prayer to send out more harvesters in the harvest field. God bless.